YouTube? Is it YouTube or Zoom?
It's Zoom broadcasting to YouTube. That's your choice. You can broadcast to YouTube.
Well, I know with my dad's
It's multiple YouTube.
Yeah.
Which one?
It's free. I mean, it's
Yeah.
all right. Yeah.
Okay.
he can do what he needs to do.
Yeah,
I'm doing
it's mostly the timing because I'm
Yeah.
just getting over my knee. And
I know.
I lost the whole summer last summer because of my knee. And now it looks like I'm gonna lose the whole summer again. So,
Yeah.
Oh,
Okay. Well, good morning, everyone. President, I'd like to call the March 20th, 2025 meeting of the Scarborough Economic Development Corporation Board of Directors meeting to order. What Karen was just talking about, she and I had talked for today's agenda. We had been talking about how I felt that the last couple meetings we were sort of having to rush through some of the agenda. So we had talked about moving the roundtable towards the end. And but I think Karen's suggestion is as well, we're still hoping for a couple members to come that we sort of start with that. I'm just gonna say not much, from Atlantic and Lending, our branch is set to open in May.
Oh, exciting.
Um, we are very busy. Commercial lending is still very busy for us. A lot of requests, they don't all work. Interest rates still high, but just our pipeline is, Ellen's mentioned it, a lot of people looking to buy businesses now. And selling businesses. So we're doing a lot of SBA deals. One separate item that I'll talk about, and I'll actually ask Karen to add to it, but Karen and I did have a meeting with the leadership team at Nordex, right over at the medical park. It was, they had reached out looking to meet with town, just doing some town outreach. Karen and I, Tom was supposed to go, he was sick unfortunately, but we had a great meeting, great tour of their lab. This will come as no surprise, but we talked about what was working and what was challenging. And without, I would say, any hesitation, he said the biggest challenge right now is finding housing for employees. And he said he pointed out that they had two offers that had been accepted. People in process of gonna accept jobs at Nordex and come here, and they ended up not being able to take because they couldn't find housing that works for them. And so, I mean, it's nothing that we don't know and that we haven't heard, but it was just hearing it right from the horse's mouth from a major, I'm assuming, pretty well paying employer,
Now, is this like houses or is it apartments or temporary housing?
I think
or-
both,
I'd say both. I'd say both.
Yeah, there's
Apartments going up, I'm just shocked.
but they can't afford, I mean, it depends on,
They can't. afford
but,
them.
but, I mean, rents are starting at over $2,000, for a one bedroom,
Right.
like it's,
Yeah,
Yeah, and I
So-
think, I think they just recruited a new person to the senior team. Recruited up from Texas, so we had a nice chat about that, and said you're in good company. Yeah, she and her family are living in an Airbnb for right now. So I think they're looking at all different types of housing, but and I think he said the housing accessibility is a problem like at all different types of levels.
okay.
I mean, everybody there is going to be well paid, some
Yeah.
better than others.
Yeah.
But they also said, which I thought was interesting, they have at any one time 60 openings.
Mm.
And the way the CEO explained it to us was, and we think it's just going to be a rolling 60 from now on.
Yeah.
We're never going to be fully staffed as far as we can, tell. And they are looking to do some major expansions. I shouldn't say major, looking at doing some expansion into other types of contracts most of their work is main health, but they do take out other types of testing. And I think the lab was pretty amazing. And as I sent you guys around that quick study on AI and what jobs are being affected, one of the things that the CEO said, and we heard it again from Maine Health, which Tom and Autumn and I met with earlier this week. They are looking to AI to really, help them with their staffing needs. And it's just going to grow and grow as far as they're concerned. And it makes sense because they're looking at it from the health informatics standpoint. And so that's where AI testing and all of that can really be helpful. But there is, I can't remember what they said, there's just a phenomenal amount of workflow that goes through Nordex on, I mean, every day. I can't remember, they've got deliveries all day long. They're
A lot
It's a-
happening at night though, too.
Yeah, it's a
Said
full
they
lab,
take a big shipment of, and, things that come in at the end of the day.
right? Good morning, Jim.
Yeah.
There's our quorum.
There's a quorum. No, that's okay. So yeah, that it was just it was a great meeting because really they didn't have an agenda. It was us who prompted, tell us what's going on with, recruitment and staffing and what's helping and hurting there. Certainly they're interested in, what can we as a community do about housing? And it's not just Scarborough, it's the whole region.
Yeah.
I think it's one of the things we heard from Maine Health as well. This week, housing is absolutely an issue for them. I'm actually meeting with their head of talent recruitment tomorrow morning. We have a Zoom call set up to really discuss, where they are in terms of staffing. We're particularly interested, obviously, in the Scarborough campus. And the campus has more room. They have a long-term plan on what can happen at that campus, but we pretty much have to solve we don't. I think combined with everyone else, we've got some staffing issues to work on. And I think that's the important piece as the council starts to look at housing policy. We have to figure out what is it that we as a community can do versus what we need others to do, and really joining hands and working. But I will say Maine Health was and has been very happy with the campus. We broached a couple of other subjects with them that were really community minded, and everything from, hey, you want to build us a community center to
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. This is, we put out a whole bunch of opportunities for them. And so they've been connecting us to the right people to talk to about that. This group was really focused on the facilities at the campus and, what their long-term plan might be. But I think being able to meet with both Nordex and Maine Health was awesome for us, just to get an understanding. Leadership at both institutions is relatively new.
Yeah, and he did, on a more positive note, he did say that he feels for the first time like their senior leadership team is in place.
Yeah.
Pretty much fully staffed and in place, and he referred to them as, we finally have our A team.
Yeah.
And they all seemed very kind of close and
Yeah.
joking around with each other and stuff.
Right.
Just
And an important note is the CEO who's been there 2 years does live at the Downs.
Yes.
So, he's very familiar with, the project, and I think what he was looking for they were looking for general community connections, and we're going to set them up with, talking to the legislators, which the council did last night. And, a couple of other things, but I also think that they're interested in having some of their folks who are based here in Scarborough to really reach out and join some of the other meetings and things like some of the other town committees and things like that. So, like I said, it was productive. I also think that we've had it on our agenda for a while to do, but I think we just hit 2 of our 10 largest employers. It would be great to, and we have
Three.
direct access to a third of our 10 largest employers, as well as Hannaford would be easy to say. I think we should continue having these meetings, or at least offering them. These 2, Maine Health and Nordex, reached out to us. But I think it's, put it on our agenda.
Maybe it's something that we could think about in terms of for going forward, just outreach, and it
Right.
doesn't always have to be, you could be different members of the board,
That,
I mean,
awesome.
it's, what I found interesting was, obviously, I think, was it the guy that gave us the tour, Nick was very familiar with us and had been to our dinner
Yeah.
and stuff like that, but the CEO still was like, well, I've seen the dinner invite. He's like, but I really didn't know 100% what SEDCO did. So, I think it's easy, it's good for us to be out there, explain what we do and what we're working on. And
I wonder if there's an opportunity to get together or invite the top 10 employees, companies and have a workshop on workforce housing. And get the right people at the table, because this doesn't have to be a standalone
Right.
problem. The solution could be that we all pool together and work, whether it's Scarborough Downs or another location, at, maybe there's someplace that's needs to get developed, and it doesn't, to me, it's across the board issue. It's one that could potentially unify some of these, companies to try to figure out, how do we solve this together?
well, not only in unifying the companies, but when you thinking back to the all board summit
Right.
and ways that, they can work together. I mean, if we do a
With the
meeting with the
town.
or the town or the housing committee,
Mhm.
Yep.
the employers, SEDCO, I think there's some,
Because I mean, it's one of our strategic conversations is what do we do?
We did mention to Maine Health on Tuesday saying, because we also talked about CNAs and nursing staffing and things like that. And I said, well, there are some examples here in town of companies that are trying to work on that problem. And we specifically said, we'd like to connect you with Piper Shores, and you guys might need to chat about.
Because the other thing too is childcare. So there is such a need, and is there an opportunity if we were to, partner all together to have workforce housing, could there be a daycare in the building as well, to be able to help support that? And again, is that something that the companies could help, sponsor or so subsidize or something like that? So anyway, I think there's just some really great opportunity for a common issue.
Okay.
I just had a question, if I could direct it to John.
Yeah.
John, being on long range planning, I've had a lot of discussion regarding the whole housing issue, but more in terms of how much do we want to expand the community, if you will? How do we want to allow our ability to be able to build housing, et cetera? How do you see the current council? Are they more stop or heavily controlled development? Or do you think they're a little more open to allowing a little more development than what we are now?
I think it's mixed. I think what I would say is probably like the prevailing sentiment is that, we want to have a smart growth strategy that is targeted to really enable, I think, more specifically what you guys were just discussing. Like if there are, workforce housing, affordable housing needs, I think that's our bigger focus and priority versus, development that's more market rate or higher. And I think we do have a workshop scheduled on, I think it's going to be the May 6th workshop, which I think it would be great for SEDCO to be represented and attend, where we're kind of having our first big conversation around what is our focus. We want to understand kind of the current situation within our town, and really kind of figure out and start to set some clear policy objectives that we would like to see happen. This one is highly political because I think, a lot of feedback from residents continues to be they don't like the pace of growth. Um, they don't feel like growth is being managed. So I feel like we have a lot of communication to do because personally, I think we are managing it. And we are deploying a lot of smart growth strategies, but it doesn't change the fact that people don't like seeing trees cut down and things like that. So I think that's a little bit of the political pressure we'll be under. And then, but I love this idea of a consortium of businesses, the town, the housing alliance, stakeholders coming together. I think the one thing that we know, but like again, there isn't a big presence there isn't a big vocal presence, I think, is what you guys were talking about of the business community saying, we want to provide these services. We want to be here in Scarborough, but we're really struggling. Like we hear it anecdotally sometimes from the police and fire department as it relates to recruiting, which is, a critical service that we need to be able to provide. And I think being able to have the business community be a little bit more vocal about um how they're struggling to like keep people or recruit people. I think that will hopefully help us also explain the benefit and why we need this, because these are services like at Maine Health that people in Scarborough are using. And if we can't, or Nordics and other places, and if we don't have the people who will work there because they have to commute 2 hours and they can't afford to live here, like that's going to impact our quality of life. And we want to manage that. So I think what I'm sharing, I'm confident in saying 3/4 of the council probably would agree with me. Again, I think there are some that are just very like, we need to pump the brakes. But again, if it's very focused and targeted um, around affordable and workforce, I think that will get a lot more support.
As a follow-up, if I could, John, what do you think the general feeling is regarding density? I mean,
think what I hear from residents as it relates to density, and I'm sure this is like normal for a lot of communities, not just ours. I think people love the idea of cul-de-sacs and picket fences as like what they want their town to look like. I I have not found anybody, or nobody's ever come to me and said, I love the density at the Downs, or I think that looks great. And I think that's something that I'm proud of in our community. I still, every time it comes up, people just talk about how they don't like it, how it doesn't look good, how it's not Scarborough. So I think there's a cultural aspect there that, again, with maybe some education to the public about why density is a good thing and how, especially for workforce and affordable housing, it's really necessary to happen. Like sprawl for that is just doesn't make sense. And so I would say residents don't like density, but it's an important thing that we have to work through. And I know we've talked to through long range about also not just the density, but potentially having to expand up a little bit to focus it on our high growth areas. And so I think those are all on the table for the council to consider.
all right, thank you.
And I was gonna say, I do have an excellent report that actually just came through yesterday. It's really from the economic development side of the housing issue, but it talks about, the missing middle. And that's where I think we are. There's nationwide, some really, really, really high density and then single family, but there's a whole lot of product in between that's missing from the market that addresses some of the issues that I think people who want a single family home, you know, could be happy in this missing middle. But let me send that around to all of you. I sent it to Tom yesterday, thinking you should send it to the council because it was, number one, it's very colorful.
Was it?
And yes, and like one sentence on each page, which I really liked. You know, so you could get through the whole report. And it was very much talking about strategy, in terms of what can you do. And I thought that was important to look at. So I will send that around for everyone.
John has his hand up. Does he?
Sorry, John,
Your
on the
hand?
screen, the hand is very faded, so we didn't notice it. So if we don't reach out, just yell,
Yeah.
but
No,
yeah.
I had my hand up, but then Alan called on me and I said what I wanted to say. So
Excellent.
So now that we have more people here,
Yeah, we can
What-
push it up.
so just as an FYI, Karen and I had decided to move the roundtable to the end so that we could get through the agenda items this morning. And then when we were a little low, so we started with the roundtable, which Karen and I talked about Nordex and their housing feedback, which is how we got there. But do we want to go to the agenda items and then we'll go back to the roundtable at the end?
Sure.
Okay. So, first item is approvals. The first is, February meeting summary. Can I have a motion to approve the February meeting summary?
So move.
Seconded.
Any questions or comments? Seeing none, all in favor? Okay. The financial report, so was this the one that we didn't,
We didn't
Vote
approve
on
that. Yeah, we
because
didn't
we
approve
didn't
it
have a
last.
quorum, right?
Exactly,
Okay.
exactly. So this month we'll have everything from last month, and then I think it's through February, right? Right. And the one
is there
thing I would
anything you want to speak
Yeah.
on the financial report?
Yeah, one of the things I want to say about the financial report, it's all pretty straightforward, but one of the things we are trying to do is combat my nervousness about unexpected expenses,
Mhm.
because I wait till the like May and June to start spending some of our for hardware, because I'm like, what if something happens and an unexpected expense? So I'm trying to let go of my fears of that. You know, 'cause we have some, a little bit of reserve that could take care of an emergency. But so we have replaced a high-end, we replaced an iPad. We did it early, so that's why you're seeing some more expenses now, as opposed to a giant expense in May and June as we try to buy all the things that we had programmed. So I'm trying to get better at that, so we're not frantically buying at the end of the fiscal year. So that's the only thing I wanted to say, just a general comment about things.
Okay, so, I have a motion to approve. Which period is this report?
It's through, go ahead and say it's through February. So since every month is listed, if you approve it, then you're approving any
Okay,
previous months as well.
so can I get a motion to, approve the financial report through the end of February 2025? So,
I'll second.
all in favor? Okay. Item 3, we did, Karen did take us through this is the proposed budget for the upcoming year. At our last meeting, we did not have the quorum able to vote for it, to approve it. This budget, so we're approving the budget that you will present to Tom and
Yes,
the town.
correct. We did because it was required, the department budgets were required to be submitted week before last. So
Yep.
we went ahead and submitted it.
Yeah,
You
there
know,
were no, I can tell you from the last meeting, there were no,
Right.
there were no questions or concerns from members
Right.
here. Yeah,
And the only thing that has changed from last month is some, clarifications on the fiscal year 2025. And so I had last year's staffing salaries a little bit off, $1,000 or so. So anyway, I did make a couple of corrections in FY25, and the FY25 is now sort of a mix of both budget and expenses. So instead of using the 2025, what we submitted last year, I've gone ahead and updated it because I know how much we raised
Hmm.
for the annual meeting
Yeah.
and how much we spent. So that's in here. And if you went back to the original budget, it's going to look a little bit different, but it just made sense to put that to put how much we've raised, in this tally here. But yes, so the only thing that, as I said from last time, the only thing that is different, significantly different, is our audit. Just because we need to move to a new permanent auditor, our
And it's
auditor for the
like-
next
It's gonna
several
be the
months.
same company
Correct.
that the town uses currently.
Correct.
Yeah.
We're gonna have the same people do it. It'll still be a separate audit, because I asked Norm whether or not, can you just roll it in? And that was Tom's suggestion last year. So no,
They
keep
said
it.
that we keep it separate.
Keep
Yeah.
it separate. Same company can do it, but they'll just have somebody else do it there. And Norm's suggestion was he thinks that expense is going to go up to about $5,000, and we've been paying half that. But we've also had the same auditor for probably 15 years, and I don't think he's raised his prices much on us. So I think anywhere we go would probably be that. I think the security of having it done at the same time as the audit, as the town's
By
audit,
the same,
by the
company.
same people,
yeah.
gives Norm a lot less stress because he doesn't have to wait for us. So I think that makes a lot of sense. And at this point, it's not like we've signed a contract with them. We are putting in that amount that we expect it to be. And if it turns out to be less, that can still go back to the town. It's not like if it comes in at $3,000, we're not gonna take that extra $2,000 and spend it elsewhere.
Okay, can I please have a motion to approve the proposed budget?
Seconded.
And my only comment, again, is that Karen had walked us through this at the last meeting. There were no concerns. We just couldn't vote on it. My only comment. So with that, can I, all in favor? Any opposed? Oh, okay. So Karen.
Sure. Yeah. When we had the January workshop, it seemed like there were a couple of items that seemed to rise to the top. And all I wanted to do was make sure that I heard correctly what you were saying in January, and sort of update our SEDCO priorities. And, one of the things I heard is the, discussion of housing is an economic development strategy. So that certainly, should go up in our priorities. And then the question was a little more murky about 2025. I think we talked about a competitiveness assessment. And I need to sort of get a feeling, is that, should we pursue that this year and take a look at that? And I think John had some questions about fees. So if I could have, John, if you wouldn't mind talking a little bit about your question on fees.
Yeah, I mean, I just wanted to share, yesterday at our first reading, we had the town clerk bring forward adjustments to fees. A lot of them impact businesses in terms of their licensing. And so I know she did a very substantial comprehensive analysis over the past year and a half, looking at 9 towns with similar populations. So I think what she's offered is, pretty consistent with what's happening. I think it's just something it would be nice for SEDCO to kind of look at and just give us some feedback on, are these, appropriate from your guys' perspective? And then we do have our second read at our next meeting, so it is kind of in the next 2 weeks, where we plan to post those. And typically the communication, I think, is it occurs only when they come to re-up their license. And so I don't know if there's
Right.
something that SEDCO can help with in terms of just getting the message out a little bit more to the local businesses. It was, I like, massage license, anything related to restaurants, a lot of things that may impact, and all of them went up. None of them went down or stayed the same. So again, none of these are probably at the point that businesses are going to necessarily balk at them, but we just want to make sure that the business community knows that we've done this comprehensive analysis and our fees are going to go up to remain competitive within the market.
So we can certainly send it out to our list. We have about 1,400 businesses, although email wise, we probably have 800 or so emails. So we can get that out and certainly make sure that even if the board doesn't take a position on it, but businesses know that it's coming, and if they have some concerns, this is when they need to show up and say something. And that,
What are the fees for? Is it just licensing, did you say, John?
Yeah, most of it is like the annual licensing fees. I don't know, Karen, if you
Okay. Okay.
yes, just the impact fees, all the different types of fees. Basically, the ordinance doesn't, the ordinances always specify that there's a fee, but we leave it separate
Mhm.
so that that one ordinance can update all
Mhm.
fees each year.
Mhm.
And that's what the council votes on. And then they're always, when this is a general update of fees, but there's sometimes when we take a look at like impact fees when we're doing something new, like the transportation impact fee, getting rid of some roads and bringing some other roads in. That's is done separately, but once it's analyzed and the council approves it, then it goes into the regular fee updates. But that fee update is a good base for some of this competitiveness analysis that we want to do. We want to look at other things like comparing different ordinances and what people have to do. What does a small business have to do to get X license or get a site plan? Those are the types of things that I'm talking about. Our competitiveness analysis include, and that's certainly going to take a little bit of time. So it's probably 3 to 6 months in terms of really aligning our ordinances, which is surprisingly complex, trying to align what we require people to do versus what another town. So equalizing them takes a little bit of time to do.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Listening to what John had said earlier, and I appreciate the work that Kristen did in regards to this, but my question to the board would be, should we be comparing ourselves to towns of equivalent size? Or should we be comparing ourselves to towns in the immediate area? Because if I was a business coming in, looking to see where I would want to locate, I would want to know that the fees are competitive to the other towns around. So that, should I go to Westbrook? Should I go to South Portland? Why do I want to go to Scarborough? I don't really care what some other town might be doing 50 miles away. I'm trying to choose where am I going to be in the greater Portland area.
Right.
So I would think those fees would want to be compatible.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like all the towns in the greater Portland area were included. The one that I think was the furthest town was Auburn, Lewiston. I think we looked at that, and so, but it did include the ones you mentioned, Alan. I don't know all 9 of them, but I recall South Portland. I don't know if we included Portland because of its unique size and nature. Westbrook was included. And so I think they did a good job, I think, trying to consider both, not just size, but like who are our local groups.
I thought it was a size comparison and that's what I wasn't sure of. That would be the right pick. Thank you.
Yep. So I pulled it up so I can just quickly highlight the types of things. So it was waste disposal fees, hawkers and peddler fees, taxi cab licenses, innkeeper licenses, special amusement licenses and fees, massage establishment fees, ice cream trucks, pawnbroker fees, food handler fees. Those are the ones that I think may impact businesses.
So I'll compile that and send it out to our distribution list so everybody has a chance to take a look at it.
Yeah, and I think you're making everyone aware of this, and if you feel if you feel or want to comment, this is your opportunity.
Right, exactly, exactly. And then I'd like to bring back to the board at our next meeting, really an outline of what our competitiveness assessment would be, what we're going to include, what we're going to look at. Fees would be one part of it, which, yay, most of it's done. So I would propose to bring that back. Again, I just want to check in. Does that make sense that we should do that analysis?
I think it does. I think we have to be thoughtful about not creating a tool that could hurt us.
Right.
So I mean, this is going to be public information. So I think the important thing is presenting it in a way that shows space for improvement, not making it easy to not come
Right.
here.
Right.
Do you have a company that would do that, or is that something you?
Think we would try to do it in-house in
Okay.
consultation with the planning department
Okay.
and others
Okay.
to make sure we're framing the issue correctly. And you're absolutely right. I think what we've always said about Scarborough is we're not trying to be the cheapest town. We have
Mhm.
complex issues.
Mm.
And so there's a level of complexity that makes sense. But I think there are some opportunities to look at maybe a couple of case studies of, like Jim went through some, I think, interesting systems of trying to get the smoke shop approved. And so that's part of what I think we should look at is, how did that process go? Maybe there's a couple of other examples. And, I think we can look at, hey, was there a smoother way to do this? That was maybe less, I don't want to speak for you, but I think it was a little bit stressful, that both timeline and the types of things that needed to be done.
But
Can
you're
I-
doing that,
The project didn't match the complexity of the process.
but from a competitive analysis, you're saying you would compare that process to other towns?
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
So what I would be interested in, Karen, as you kind of frame this, is like, I would like to see us set another aggressive goal to say we want 30% of our tax base to be commercial, and what are the barriers? What are our strengths, but what are our barriers that we need to
How do we
work
get
through
there?
to make sure that we can create new policy or things that, better enable our success to get to that 30%. And the comparative stuff will be helpful. But to me, it's really about, we want businesses to come, and the good thing for that for our taxpayers is it helps to kind of offset some of the tax issues, and like knowing what we need to do to make that happen is really important.
Right, so that's a 20% growth.
Do
When
it.
you consider the fact that we're roughly 25% now,
Mhm.
and you're trying to grow 5%. So what is a realistic time frame for that, John?
In terms of us getting there,
Yeah,
I don't know. I think that's a good question, and maybe one we have to kind of see. I know it took us quite some time to get to 25%. And even some of that housing conversation that we had, I'm sure, is one of the big barriers that we have to address if we ever want to get there.
It's a little like the 30 by 30
Yeah.
goals.
Yeah.
We have a goal of 30%, but it's not going to happen tomorrow.
Yeah, I mean, we could
Well,
say
I think
30% by 2035, or whatever the group thinks might be a realistic but stretch goal, just like the 30 by 30. Like, I hope we get there, but if we don't get to 30 by 30, I think that's okay. It's really the intent of, we want good policy and decisions that move the needle.
I think the competitive analysis can also look at where are other towns in that comparison, what percentage are they from a business standpoint? That is kind of, again, probably is a good gauge. I agree with Travis. I think this is it's a good exercise for us to do. And as I think about how do we share this information with the residents of Scarborough, I think this might help support some of that communication to them as well.
Yeah,
depending on what we find, it might be
Mhm.
something valuable to share at the next annual meeting, you know, when we do our update, you know, I mean,
Sure.
we're always, you know, just so everyone knows, we're always looking to see how we compare. This is, you know, we did some research, this is what we found. I think that would be interesting at the next.
Well, and I think that John's presentation of how to go about it is
Yeah.
correct, which is not just, we don't want to fall in that trap of,
Right.
here's where we're not the cheapest, because
Right.
we don't need to be the cheapest. Our goal is to be the best. And so I think that presenting it as, we have some tangible goals. And we're going to get there by strengthening ourselves in some categories where we're not currently the strongest, rather than just a list of, well, if all you care about is fees, you should go to Gore because they're
Right.
better than us on that. And then all of a sudden we have to lower our fees, which we don't want to.
Right.
So I think John came up with the right way to go
That
about it,
is-
which is there's a target, and to hit it, these are the things we need to be better at.
Yeah. Yep. All right. That makes a great deal of sense. So if you guys don't mind workshopping it with me, so to speak, at the next meeting, that would be great. We'll start with an outline and see where we go. But I think, John, I think that's an excellent way to present it, and I think it would resonate with the businesses as well. Um,
You said we're gonna talk about it at the next meeting. Okay.
Yeah.
I'll keep my thoughts.
Yeah. um,
don't get me started.
All right, so next on our list was, I just, with all the changes going on at the federal level, I did write, Tom a note. He had asked all the department heads which of us were dependent on federal grants, and the direct answer to that question is, well, SEDCO is not dependent on federal grants, but there's a lot of stuff going on that can affect the local economy. And also a lot of things happening at the state that could affect allocations for next year. Although, John, I don't know if you want to, before we get too far into this, the council did have a workshop with our legislative delegation, or the main legislative delegation, last night. And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, the things that I heard were they're very much aware that property tax burden is growing and they want to do some things to address it. It's probably too much to think that there might be local option taxes, but they're looking at some of those issues. But I think the most important thing I heard was this commitment to not reducing revenue sharing. And so keeping that at the current level at a minimum is just really important, I think, for the municipalities. I don't know if there's more that you want to add to that, John, in terms of what you heard last night.
Yeah, I think I think what we're ultimately looking for them, and it's kind of the theme in the legislature this year, is really around trying to reduce property tax burden. Local option sales tax, as Karen said, was discussed, and I think that's something that GP is going to actually start to pull together some ideas across communities to actually offer some suggestions, probably not this legislature, but maybe in the next legislative round. The legislature shared, to what Karen said, these come up every year, but they never really seem to take traction. But they said if communities really want it and advocate for it, it might be something that could happen. We talked too about TIFs and seeing if we can expand the use of TIF money. We also talked about transportation, the Gorham Connector, and we talked about housing as well. Like, as Karen mentioned, like if we do this consortium in the future, having the state involved, because there's a lot that they're trying to do as well. And we might need laws in place in order to enable some of the things that we think we need. So those were probably the big topics that we covered yesterday.
John? Another question, John?
Mhm.
I thought I can't remember where I read it, but I thought I read somewhere that the Gorham Connector got pulled off the table by the Turnpike Authority.
It was pulled up.
Now you're bringing it up again.
It was pulled off. Westbrook yesterday also removed their support, and there is legislation that Stacey Brenner is sponsoring, basically to remove the authority of MTA to create the Gorham connector and to provide the land back to landowners or municipalities. So that's something that's on the legislative agenda. And, her comment yesterday was she doesn't think that will pass. It's just there to start the conversation, and see what comes of it as we go forward. But again, I know that's going to be, solving some of the congestion in that area, and what happens there, could actually in the future be an economic catalyst for our community if we, depending on what we envision that area being or around Running Hill Road. So again, there is some connection there, I think, to SEDCO as well that you guys might be interested in.
Thank you.
And so the only thing I would add to that discussion from last night, there is a lot of discussion on, what TIF funding can be spent on. And listen, I'm all for broadening the types of things that the town can spend the TIF money on. The only thing that I would say is, this comment is to John as well. The TIF funding, TIFs were set up to encourage economic development. And that money is supposed to be used to do things that would spur economic development. So as much as I want those uses broadened, I just want to make sure the TIF funding doesn't turn into something else, that's still the primary focus is how we're going to use this money to grow the economy within a municipality.
Now, having said that, I mean, economic development is could be pretty broad.
Exactly.
So, no, but I mean, honestly, right? I mean,
Yeah.
so if someone says we're gonna use TIP money to help develop housing, well, housing could be, you could argue,
Yeah.
could help with economic development,
Mm,
or infrastructure changes. Well, infrastructure changes could be, you could argue, could help with economic development. So it's,
I just don't want to remove the requirement to link it back to
Yeah.
economic development
Correct.
in a rational way. And I think what you've seen is, over the whole time period of TIF legislation, some of the economic development folks have opposed some of the efforts to broaden the tax base just for that particular issue. But I don't think we're in any danger here. I just want to make sure that people still understand it's the economic development tool, and it's the only incentive tool that municipalities really have.
Yeah.
So that's my only comment.
I think like an example, and again, it may not be to like stretch it, but like what John made me think of was, right now we don't have water in the Running Hill Road district.
Right.
And it's not in a TIF district, but we have these TIF funds. If we wanted to use those TIF funds to create water, build that infrastructure, that would again be something we wouldn't have to bond for. And as
Right.
we get those TIF funds, we can, divert them to things that would foster it outside of the zone. So there's like limitations of what we can do within the TIF district. And so I think that would be like, it would be nice just to have a little bit more flexibility to do these types of things that we can't do today.
But that's exactly the type of thing that I think is crucial to look at. How can we spend those funds? Downtown has a little more flexibility than a regular TIF in terms of spending outside the district. But yeah, just being cognizant that it's an economic development tool. So sort of back to the memo, I think one of the things I just wanted to point out was, we do have people in town who are employed by the federal government. There's about 200 folks who live here who have federal jobs. I don't have any indication of what those jobs are or who might be impacted, but just to understand that. And if I looked at all of federal, state, local government, as well as the nonprofit employment, you're looking at 25% of Scarborough's economic base. So we don't know any numbers, any specifics, but just keep that in mind, that there's 25% of our employment base that can be really affected by that. And the thing that I think of is, if this were another industry, that was doing this type of layoffs, we would be all over that in terms of trying to figure out how can we best help this industry and reemploy the folks and things like that. And I just think that it's a little bit cart before the horse in terms of what we're doing, but we've got to stay on top of that as things change and really begin to affect our residents here. We have to look at some traditional economic development ways of assisting basically a downsizing industry. If you were Piper Shores, I think you guys are at the size that you'd have to do it. If you laid off more than X percentage of your business, you would have to notify us. There's some federal regulations around that, but I don't think that's happening here. I guess my point is, we just want to be cognizant that impacts are happening. We don't exactly understand all the details, but at some point we may be asked to really think about how do we redeploy a section of our labor force that needs new jobs. And I don't know, Travis, if there's anything you're hearing at the county level or.
I mean, we're still in this era of everything is unknown. We're not hearing a lot of mass layoffs from our perch. What I will say is we have federal grants. We have a public health department that's grown from 1 to 10 people in the last few years, largely from federal grants. They're applying for a major federal grant right now that was written during the Biden administration. It's going to be scored during the Trump administration. So they're trying to write it to the questions that were asked by an administration that will be scored by one that doesn't like those questions. So how do you do it? And where I think your point about the nonprofits is a very important one, because there are protections for government employees that just don't exist in that world. And we've had to go around to our partners and say, we just don't know if that money is going to come anymore. So I think a lot of the scarier uncertainty is in that layer of people connected just outside the ring of people who are employed by governments, because they don't have that, the safety net is very quickly unraveling, but it doesn't exist at all outside of the government with those who are attached to it. Also harder to find. But what I would say is, from where I'm sitting, we haven't seen that, oh my God, there's 100 people unemployed moment yet. And there's also, but the challenge is, there's no rapid response program from the local job board to say, you reported this to us, we're here to help. Who knows? So I think we're still in that, like, we don't quite know what has happened, what's going to. The challenge with saying we're going to go in and reemploy all these people is there's another federal government you can put them at until this one gets its census back. Hopefully, God willing, there's another election and things change. But it's for people whose specialty is something to say, we're going to need you again, hopefully, eventually. Don't go get trained to do some completely other thing. It's a different thing, than if you work in manufacturing, you can manufacture something else. It's a specialty that is going to be required again eventually, and might be required again when a judge says you can't fire them. So everybody is like, I don't know. I'm not saying anything. They don't notice. And that's sort of where it feels like everybody is right now.
Yeah. I will say that Greater Portland Council of Governments, who is obviously a nonprofit directly related to the municipalities here, they did a really excellent analysis for us, saying, about 65% of their budget is from the federal government. And over the last month, they've had the spigots turned off on some of their federal grants, but they are all back on right now. And they have been fully reimbursed for all the work that has been done. So that is a positive sign that there may be some interruptions, but they are definitely keeping on top of that, making sure they're being reimbursed, because that's where a lot of the transportation money comes through GPCOG. There's all sorts of things. I think the thing that I will say that was a little bit unnerving, and partly why I wrote the memo is I just come back from a meeting with the Economic Development Council of Maine, and part of that was a set of a meeting, I mean, a session with the 4 representatives of the different federal offices. So, the 2 council districts and the 2 senator districts came, not 2 representatives and the 2 senators. And they basically were, this 2 weeks ago, they were shell shocked and they said, we don't know what's happening. We've gone from having 100 calls, 110 calls or whatever to 3,000 calls a day. So we're spending all of our time just reacting to things. They've got 25,000 emails coming in. And the day before the feds had closed the HUD office in the state of Maine. So, which all of HUD things that were done here in Maine are now being done, I think, out of New Hampshire. So, the reaction from them was just a little bit disconcerting, but totally understandable. But, they're all like, nope, we're working through it. If something gets turned off, we're working on getting it turned back on. So
Hey,
I think that's, sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, Karen, I think it's great that we're focusing on kind of the impact to the federal workforce. I'm more curious, and I don't know if you started to look into this, like with the tariffs, which I also know are kind of all over the
Yes.
place. How is that going to impact our local economy? Like which industries are most at risk, especially with Canada and anything that we rely on for Canada, or even our manufacturing in terms of if we get any things from China. So like I think it would also be good for us to kind of keep a lens on what's happening there because I have a sense that there could be some unemployment caused if businesses are having to make tough choices about how to meet their margins and maybe have to make choices about letting people go.
It's definitely true. What we had is some information at the federal level, I mean, at the national level, and the difference between the projected growth in the economy from assuming sort of mild tariffs to the current 25% is the TD Bank economist said, hey, we're going to go from 2.5% growth to maybe 0.4% growth nationally. And so, yeah, we need to figure out what does that mean locally, but those tariffs are going to make a significant difference if they stay on the economy. There's no question about that. And TD Bank, obviously based in Canada, probably has a pretty good sense of what's going on, locally. But I mean, I have to admit, I was watching John Oliver last week tonight. Not this Sunday, but the Sunday before. And they actually mentioned Old Orchard Beach and the fact that Canadians aren't going to go to Old Orchard Beach this year. I'm like, really? That was on a national show. But yeah, so John, you're right. There's going to be some
Maine
trickle
is gonna
down
be
here
impacted
more than others.
more than others
Yeah,
due to its relationship with Canada.
right. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's partly why I wrote that memo, just to
Mhm.
say here are the things we need to be watching for and thinking about. And then I did include a little bit about the Marita conference, and I don't know, John was there, I was there, I think Kevin was there.
Kevin was there.
Yeah. So in that same memo, I just did a bit of a overview of what was happening from the industrial office and retail market, and also that discussion with some experts at the Economic Development Council of Maine. They're like, you know what, local economic developers need to focus on their traditional roles. Like we need to be focused on, business retention, expansion, and really, there's a lot of noise up here, but we got to be doing our regular job, reaching out to people and figuring out what really is happening out there. So I thought that was great advice. So look at job stability and creation, look at tax-based stability and growth, look at diversification and the tax base. Those are in our wheelhouse to deal with. And that's where it was suggested that the local folks should be.
And just a couple things on Marina Conference, I'll mention the three takeaways. One, I think was it the director of the Rue Institute? Was the
Yes.
Keynote speaker and did a wonderful presentation of what that campus is gonna look like,
Mhm.
and how far they've come. And the businesses they're working with, and specifically mentioned, Bangor, they have a big relationship with Bangor, and they're giving AI training, I think, to all Bangor employees, so you'll have to let us know how that goes. But that was a great presentation. The breakout sessions that I attended, one was hospitality because of a project that Atlantic's working on. It was interesting, they had, one of the panelists said, I can't remember the year, maybe 2000, which was when, someone brought up the moratorium of new hotel development in Portland. One of the panelists brought up that, I think it was 2000, both the Hilton Garden Inn and the Port Harbor Hotel were proposed. And everyone in Portland said, this is absolute madness. Portland cannot support two new hotels at the same time. There's no way both of them will work. And then, I mean, now it's like every week another one opens and they're all, Christ, they said in season, not in the summer, 95% vacancy on a weeknight, 100% vacancy on the weekends. It said statewide, annual occupancy for the year was 70% statewide, all markets. Just unbelievable. It said Portland and Maine have really become a premier vacation upscale premier destination. They say the number one spot on the East Coast is always referred to as is always said to be Charleston, but Maine, Portland is really almost catching up
Wow.
with that level. And it's more about the hotel, it's the experience, that's why there's a lot of boutique hotels now. So that was very interesting. It seems that industry is going really strong. And then the only other breakout section I wanted to mention was housing. The woman, I can't remember her last name, but her first name is Elise, does the single family residential, and she gave a very similar, I'm sorry?
Police Kylie.
Yes, yep. And she gave a very similar presentation that she did last year. She talks about what does she call them? Senior I can't remember, she calls them Sams and Sens. But one of them is just baby boomers with tons of cash that come in and spend cash on their dream houses in Maine. The other ones are now empty nesters, senior empty nesters, and they are completely driving the housing market right now because they buy cash. People, there's sort of a cycle. People buy their starter house, then they move up, and then they move even bigger or downsize. And right now, people aren't moving out of that middle section because either they have a 2% interest rate that they don't want to lose, or they can't afford anything more. The only people that can are people coming in with cash. And so they are really driving the housing market, and there's sort of this bottleneck, and the starter homes aren't available for young people, and then the next step up aren't available for the next step. And so that's just, again, it was very similar to last year's presentation, and I think she said that she has a feeling she'll be giving the same presentation next year too.
Yeah, I think the two things about the vacancy rates. One, I think Southern Maine is in a pretty good situation right now. Like office vacancies are not bad compared to the nation. During the Marita conference, they talked about the suburban market in office being really about 12-13% vacancy. And then a report came out after Marita from the Bullis Company, and they're suggesting that the office vacancy rate for Scarborough and South Portland was more like 3 or 4%. So, the difference between zeroing in on Scarborough and South Portland. So that is lower than I would have anticipated because there are a couple of vacancies out there that I would have thought would shoot us up a little bit. So I'm gonna call Bolus and try to figure out what they know that I don't know, which is probably a lot, but I was interested in the discrepancy between Scarborough and South Portland versus the rest of the suburban market. So that's why you got the extra report on vacancy rates. And the only other thing I want to say, particularly in light of our discussions on the light industrial district and things like that, one of the things in the industrial section they talk about, number one, we still have super low vacancy rate, like Scarborough under 1% for industrial. Now that gets a little blurry because newer industrial sometimes looks a little bit more like office than industrial. In fact, Nick, or the tax assessor and I have talked about that. Like some of the innovation district is really being classified as office, not industrial, just because of the high-end nature of some of it. But the other thing that was said, which I think we've known for a while, the office vacancy seriously low. But for a company that wants to build for itself, what's happening is they're buying down the cost of the investment. In other words, they're going ahead and building a new building if they want to, and they know that the money that they're investing in that building is way more, maybe let's say 20%. It's more than what they would get if they turned around and tried to rent that industrial building. So they're making that decision because they want or need, a new facility. And I'm like, I'm not sure I know what to do with that right now. But it looks.
Yeah, no, we run into it all the time because if they want to finance it, it won't raise and you can't get financing. So it's a slippery slope. I
Yeah,
mean, unless they're willing to put a lot of money into it, the
Right.
project just won't happen.
right,
But some industries want something very specific,
right,
so they're willing to pay that
Mm.
additional
right.
to
The-
get what they want.
Yeah, the big example of that is Harvey Tools in Gorham. They knew that they were going to build a building that they are going to be upside down in. And they made that decision consciously.
I mean, it's easy to do if somebody has deep pockets, but
Yeah.
a lot of people like, oh, I just want to put up a steel building, and it's like,
Yeah,
Well, Northland talked about that in Marita,
exactly.
where they, sometimes, Northland basically said, we really prefer for the company to put in money for the, build out, because if Northland has to do everything, then it's too hard for them to get financing, because the buildings won't appraise for the amount that they need to do. So they will build the building and ask the tenant to put in the build out. Keeps the building value a little bit, so it makes it easier for them to get financing.
so we can finance these whole improvements regardless of what it
Yeah.
is.
Okay.
And then the last thing, and just back to the housing really quick. The number of $1 million sales, the number of $2 million sales, and the number of $5 million sales have all increased by 4 times since 1999. I mean, 2019, sorry. So in the last 5 years, the number of $1 million sales, $2 million sales, and $5 million sales have been all increased 4 times by a factor of 4, each of those,
Yeah.
in 5 years.
And we've seen that in Scarborough as well. Some of those, we have several in those categories.
Yeah.
Well, and I just wonder if that's population driven too, in terms of the aging, like people who are in those homes for 40 years, and
Right.
are moving into a retirement community or whatever. It's,
Yep.
and their property now is just skyrocketed since.
Yeah. So I've pulled some data on the housing market. So I will probably bring that to you next time, just so you can get a sense of it. It's pretty remarkable. And I think our next topic is talking about council goals and how we can be of assistance. And I think one of those areas is certainly the housing analysis. We've been steadily pulling everything possible about the existing market right now, which I'm putting together and I'll probably bring to you next month as well. So we just want to confirm for John, we're all in on helping, with any council goals that you need information on. But we are particularly, I say this with a question mark just to make sure I'm thinking correctly. Certainly interested in the housing and long-term growth issues. That's certainly something that I think this group will want to weigh in on and really roll up their sleeves on.
Yeah.
So however we can be of help, we're going to sort of do our own thing and then give you some information. But if there's something specific that you want to know, please, reach out to ask us of those things.
I think, as I mentioned earlier, I think it will be super helpful to have you guys come to the workshop or have some representation at the workshop, Karen, with SEDCO at the table, just to make sure, because this is going to be more of like a first step early brainstorming. And again, the more we can identify partners to help us advance our thinking, and, if you want to raise your hand to say SEDCO can do these two things, I think that'll be helpful to have.
Can you remind us when that is? I'm sorry.
May 6th.
May
Yeah,
6th.
May 6th. That's currently what we have scheduled.
It would be a nice.
Sorry, it would be May 7th. Sorry.
May 7th.
Okay.
And it'd be at 5 or 5:30 is my guess, right?
5:30 probably. I think this is going to be, part of this is educational for us. Like, we're looking for understanding like the current state, and then have discussion on where do we go from the current state to where we want to be.
I guess the last thing we should talk about, we don't always meet in April, but I think I have enough material that I need to run by you, that if you wouldn't mind having an April meeting, that would be awesome. And it'd be-
Vacation is usually the third weekend.
Oh,
So.
Yes, and I am not.
Yeah.
I will
April,
be-
right? You said.
April,
Okay.
yeah,
So that week of the 21st, I am away.
okay.
So, I mean, you could push it a week.
I could certainly miss, but if not,
Yeah.
I could certainly
No,
try to do a bunch.
There's
Well,
no,
because you said Travis is.
there's no magic because it's not really on our schedule to meet in April, so we can move-
First,
that might be
it's
good.
a Thursday. But I wouldn't be able to do the 24th.
Okay. How does May first?
Do
In
we
the
have,
Might
air.
be, yeah, you're in the air. Um,
do we have a May meeting with that?
oh, shoot, yes,
Yeah,
we would have a
because we have a
regular
May
May meeting.
meeting,
Good
yeah.
point. Thank you.
Well,
So what if,
that
what about,
can-
Oh, could we just move it?
Mhm.
yeah,
Well, I think with
I will
notice we
say
can.
monthly is becoming a challenge.
yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
So if we can not meet every month, that would
Okay.
be better.
All right. It would be nice to meet before the council workshop, I guess I would say. So
Again, May 1st.
May 1st would work.
does May 1st work for everybody?
Yes.
Okay. All right. It's a
So
nice
regular time.
compromise.
Mhm.
Yeah, and then we won't meet that third week.
As the 17th, so we cannot meet 17th because
Right.
vacation is the following, am I right?
Right, so we'll move the 17th to May 1st. And we just need to put that on the website, so we have plenty of notice that I think probably we should call that, we're canceling the May meeting and adding the May 1st meeting.
All right, cancel.
All right. So
Okay?
canceling the May
17th.
17th meeting. Yeah, okay.
Can you send that invite,
I will send it,
please?
Yeah.
Just really helpful.
Yeah, and then we already talked about the Marita conference, so I think we're,
Oh, okay.
yeah, that's the last
I think
piece.
sorry if I.
No, that was the last piece. So-
Yeah, okay, so we've got, if anyone needs to go, obviously, but we've got 12 minutes left, if anyone wants to.
I'll do the round table.
Sure, yeah.
I got a couple of things here. One is, to you guys, Travis and John. Can, before we leave, set up a meeting date for new memberships?
Yeah.
Secondly, just as a note to you, Karen, I personally love the open door logo.
Oh, okay,
I think that is a great I think we can position that in a couple of different ways. Like, we're opening the door up to business for Scarborough. We're gonna try to make things easier for people to come in and be able to establish businesses in our town. I just love that
Okay.
aspect, so I thought I'd give you feedback on that. Real quickly, long-range planning. We have a smaller backlog of items that we are being requested to look at this time from our residents. So that's not usual. Usually we've got a pretty fair backlog of requests to look at different things, different ordinances in town. But that seems to be down, but it's good because it's helping us focus more on what the council wants. We were involved in a major project and we spent pretty much all of 2024 consolidating our ordinances into one piece of paper, so to speak. You know, granted, it's multiple pages long, but it's only one now. And in the past, it was three. So if you were a business trying to come into town and trying to figure out what you could do and what you couldn't do, it was a pain in the butt. Because you could do it over here, but you couldn't do it over there. It was, you know, it would drive the planning board nuts, it would do everything, but we have finally finished that project. It is consolidated, it is one document now, which hopefully will make it easier for businesses trying to come into town. Let's see. And the next thing is we're looking, unless something else comes in, we're looking at how do we assist the council right now with the goals that they've established. And I know housing certainly is one that's going to rise to the top. So we talked about it a little bit at the last meeting, and I'm sure that will continue to occur. So pretty much what's going on with long range planning right now. I'm done.
Thank you, Alan. Does anybody have any other updates they want to bring up?
I can just real quickly, so there was I don't think I mentioned this at the last meeting. There was an article in the New York Times, I think in February, talking about CCRCs that are going bankrupt. And so we're not going bankrupt. Just to be clear on the record. And in fact, with all the people on the wait list, we got a lot of calls regarding concerns about that. And so we're actually hosting a webinar, a financial webinar, to just kind of show the financial strength of the organization. But there's a lot of concern with seniors on, are they going to have enough money? And if they're investing in an organization, and I think part of it is going to be some concerns on whether some of these organizations, especially like nursing homes, that are federally funded. And with all the nursing homes closing as it is, what is that going to look like? So I think that that's something that the senior population is definitely concerned about and thinking about in terms of how are they going to pay for some of this. The other thing, I'm glad you mentioned some of the nonprofit stuff. We're going to be hosting a volunteer opportunities fair at Piper Shores. Right now, we're looking at April. We're not getting a whole lot of response back from nonprofits right now, and we're trying to figure out if that's staffing or whatnot. But we're going to invite. Well, we've invited, but we're going to have maybe 30 nonprofit organizations at Piper Shores. It's open to the public, and it will be opportunities for the public to come and talk to nonprofits, organizations, and offer some volunteer opportunities. So
Can you let us know?
yeah, I will. One of the things I was going to ask is if any of you have nonprofits that you would like to at least invite, let us know who the person or the organization is and the contact information, and we'll make sure that they get an invite.
Do you have a target market that you're going after? Or
No,
target?
so I wanted to definitely include almost all of the Scarborough nonprofits. So I think we got most of them, but I may have missed a couple. And then all over all different kinds of industries.
Okay.
We really wanted a variety to be able to be represented. and we've got room. So, I think it's an important event right now, where especially with people who want to be, volunteering, and these organizations that are probably going to need a lot of volunteers.
Sure. Did you reach out to the town? You want the town involved in that because,
So we did send an invite to the
Okay.
town. They haven't responded.
okay, let me talk. I'll reach out. I
Um,
think that's a great opportunity for us.
We did have them, so we did this, I think the last one we did in 2019, and we had done it in previous years. We did have someone from the town of Scarborough
Okay.
there. We've invited like the fire department, the police department, like the VIPs. The library, Project Grace. I
Okay.
think Project Grace was like the first RSVP.
Sure. Steffi's on top of that.
So just, email
Checked
me.
in with the Southern Maine area on
Yeah,
aging.
they're on it.
Seniors are always looking.
Yeah.
For volunteer opportunities.
Yeah, they're on it as
Yeah.
well.
The
Yeah.
library. I think,
Mhm.
would be another one to
Yeah.
Advertise.
Yeah.
And is
The hospice,
Yes.
is open to everyone?
it's open to the public.
So like high schoolers can also?
Yep. Yeah, absolutely.
And when is it?
So right now it's scheduled for Saturday, April 19th. We may have to push that to the I think it's going to be May 17th if we don't get enough participants.
Participants meeting.
The nonprofit
Agencies, okay.
agencies, yeah,
The key club at the high school would be a like.
Yeah.
Station.
yeah, yeah, I can reach out to them for sure.
And she is on the Key Club.
Oh, good.
So I can,
Tell her about it. Yeah.
we'd be away on the 19th, but we'd be back for the 17th.
Yeah, so we'll try to, I wasn't looking at the calendar when we're just looking at availability in our own calendars, and we didn't realize that's Easter weekend. So that's maybe part of the issue too.
Okay.
So, but I'll send out the invite to all of you, and then you can certainly forward it, or just let me know if there's organizations.
Yeah, send it. I'll send you Allison's contact, but send it to Allison if you want it to be in the town newsletter, that there's this
Oh,
opportunity
yes.
to come.
That would be great.
Are you the contact person?
I can be for this group.
No, I only ask because my daughter works for a nonprofit
Yes,
and I
Yeah, she
could
can just email
send
me.
some information to you.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah. So I just think it's good timing for us to be hosting this, and it's an important community event.
Awesome.
Anybody else want
Yeah,
to
I have a quick update.
announcement or anything? Yeah, John?
So yesterday we did amend our light industrial district. And so what those amendments do is removes cannabis cultivation and marijuana, or cultivation and adult use manufacturing from the district. So those were previously allowed and they've been removed. And then we kept in trucking terminals, which has been the big area of concern. However, we did make an amendment to kind of limit hours, but give the planning board the authority to waive that if they so choose. So the LI district is hopefully done for now. Thank you, Alan, for all your work on it. I know it's been a long time that the long range planning committee has been on, but at least now we're done, and we lifted the moratorium yesterday as well.
Yeah.
I think those are great changes
Mhm.
for that zone.
Yeah, I think John explained it last night, they're trying to thread a needle of really brokering peace between, the light industrial district and the needs of having that, and a small group of neighbors that are directly impacted. And it was, a difficult negotiation, if you will, but hopefully it's settled. And I think that was, for me, that was the most important thing is, I'm not sure I'm so worried about the details. I just want to know that it's at least settled so that we can, move forward on how it gets, and talking with businesses about what's going to happen there.
John, did the marijuana testing remain?
That remained. There was no amendment to remove that.
All right, thank you.
Jim, Travis, Helen, anything?
And just to echo your sentiment, it's very busy, and it's not just Portland, it's the whole state.
Yeah.
We are very, very busy.
It's good though.
Business London, yeah,
Test to that.
shocking.
Yeah, I am surprised with rates where they are, how busy.
And last year at this time did, but
Wow.
did.
Yeah.
It didn't really start to pick up until midsummer,
Mm.
and we're starting. I mean, we never got slow. Did you guys get slow? Usually January, February, March, things slow down.
No.
And we did not.
Got busier.
Yes, and.
Jim, Travis, anything?
For my partner.
Okay.
Yeah, nothing impactful really. Just can't wait for warmer weather and
Those stormy locks.
First day of spring,
I gotta say, the
first day of spring today.
stormy locks, as good as ever, Jim.
Thank you.
That is my father's favorites, said they were wonderful, so.
That's good. Thank you.
John, anything more? Nope, okay.
Great, well, thank you for joining, John, as always. There's nothing else. Can I get a motion to adjourn?
Do you want to do the logos?
Oh, Margo's pointing out, if anybody has any reaction to the logos, certainly take it. You can email us too. If that's easier since we're at the end of the.
Question about the color. Are we limited as to the colors that the town uses?
I'm
I like that.
I'm
Idea.
partial to
Yeah.
to that, but I'm just because it
I like
matches
the
the
branding,
signs.
yeah, the branding piece of it.
And we don't have with that. This is not an urgent piece. We've just been noodling this for a while and thought we'd get some
Mhm.
reaction. I have to admit the one that, well, I shouldn't say, there's one basket I don't like.
I don't like the handshake hands.
It looks like,
No.
two guys shaking hands.
Yeah.
It's
And,
also just such a,
It's
it's such
so-
an
Yeah.
old clip art.
Yeah,
right.
When you've seen it.
Yeah.
before.
I mean, I was like, well, maybe they could at least be fist bumps. We don't shake hands anymore.
Yeah, I think the other two are more thoughtful.
yeah, yeah, I didn't like the handshake.
Good. All right. But I'm not alone. Did everybody get that was a door opening? Does that make sense? Okay. All right. Well, we can talk about that in May, but I just wanted, since they came this week, I just wanted to get them out to you.
All right.
Yeah.
Multiple ways to spend.
Helen actually made a motion to adjourn, because someone seconded.
Second,
And all in favor?